made you into an entrepreneur that you're today?
We decided to just focus on one problem and go really deep on it because this was our last shot. And if this doesn't work,
what were some of the hardest days? Like, okay, this is the time for me to give up or to go back to my job.
Biggest realization for me, your pedigree, your degree, your achievements, none of that matters. But
so you have over 500,000 organizations using your product. How did you acquire a very initial set of customers?
We failed every time. We failed differently each time. But the reality was,
apart from COVID, was there any other breakthrough moment when you thought, now this product is absolutely going to be successful?
The startup graveyard is full of companies that were once the next big thing.
Did you face those early rejections? And they said, okay, this product is not going to work out.
There's a thing saying,
when you started back in 2016 and 17, what was the architecture look like?
At the time, it was a monolith code base. We were using MongoDB. We were using Node, which is so inefficient.
You have onboarded some of the toughest VCs like Khosla Ventures and Canon. So what was the story to get funding from these big VCs?
They're betting on these larger technological changes, bigger moonshots. Revenue matters, scale matters, and all of that stuff matters. But
in today's episode, I had the opportunity to talk one-on-one with Krish Ramineni, co-founder and CEO of Fireflies.ai, the AI meeting assistant company that has been used by more than 700,000 organizations worldwide. That is super cool. Krish shared his inspiring journey from leaving a well-paid job at Microsoft to launching Fireflies and making it a profitable company. He raised more than $19 million from top VCs in Silicon Valley, including Khosla Ventures, Vinod Khosla. In this episode, he talked about product-led growth and how he onboarded thousands of organizations and built a robust, scalable product. He talked about both the business as well as technology aspect of building an AI company. So if you're someone who's really interested in building an AI-powered company, this episode is for you. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation with Krish Ramineni, a visionary founder behind Fireflies.ai. Okay, well, thank you so much, Krish, for taking out time for this podcast, for driving from East Bay, 45 minutes. I really, really appreciate it.
No, it's great to be back in the Bay. I'm not here as often these days, so it's good to be on this side of town.
Awesome. So, Krish, my objective with this podcast is to learn everything about Fireflies. Again, congratulations for building an amazing company, for inspiring a lot of early stage founders like myself. And you know, Bay Area is the place, right, where a lot of people aspire to be a founder. So my objective with this podcast is to learn about your business journey as well as the technical aspect of Fireflies. Because you know, when we start companies at the beginning, okay, we all know what are the basic infrastructure we need to have, what are the data security guidelines, but it's very rare that the companies reach 500,000 paid customers and millions of users, right? So someone who's like me, who's in early stages, right, we need to know, okay, how does the infrastructure look like? What is the data security? And with all these large language models and generative AI in place, we would love to know how you're using that. Okay, so you can share as much as you want, right? And I choose to not share if there is anything confidential. But this would help a lot of aspiring technical entrepreneurs, both to get customers for growth and as well as to build a very robust product. Okay. Right. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your experiences so far, and what made you into an entrepreneur that you're today?
A lot of people will say that they became an entrepreneur because they wanted to go change the world or do these like grandiose things. It's a very much Silicon Valley Kool-Aid thing. And honestly, mine wasn't that big of a vision. It was simply in my 20s, I wanted to work for myself. And then I wanted to be able to not have to just depend on tenure to get to success. Like usually in a large organization, it's based on how much time you've spent in that org rather than how well you're executing. And like I wanted to be in a meritocracy type environment. And the best place for that was to be at a startup or to start a startup. So that was my pure goal. And then the early days were very humble, where me and my co-founder sat down and said, look, as long as we make $10,000 a month, we can cover our rents, we can cover food, we can cover our server bills, and we're great, right? That's a lot less than what I would have been making at Microsoft, especially given at the time I was a product manager, and the stock when I got in was $40. Now it's, I think, $500.
Yep.
So I gave up a lot, like I think 7 figures worth of shares when I left Microsoft. But the amount of learning I got in my 20s was incredible. So that was the first leap of faith that I had to take. Going a step back, even before Microsoft, I grew up in the US. I was born in India, moved here to the Bay when I was 5. Spent basically all my childhood in the Bay Area surrounded by other tech companies. My dad is in tech, in software. So that was just really my upbringing. All I would see when I go to Indian events or parties,
Yep.
it was just all about like other people that worked in tech. That was the only world I knew. And I went off to the East Coast, went to school at UPenn, and there I realized that there's something so special about being in the Bay, being in California, because while other people are working in tech in other parts of the country, no one did tech the way we do it here.
Yep.
So there was something really special about that. So my heart was always about coming back to the Bay. And I was dead set on coming back. I had a job offer lined up in the Bay Area, in Pleasanton, actually. And then I got an offer from Microsoft, ended up going there, spending a year working on a whole host of analytics, data science related projects, and had a wonderful time at Microsoft. Honestly, like it was a very structured environment. I got promoted within like 8 months, knew like what I needed to do to climb the career ladder. So which was really like what any like I think Desi parent would be very happy for their kids to have. So there's like structure. You go to a good school, you do this, and then after a couple of years you become a manager, and then you buy your first house, you get married. So I kind of completely threw that out the window when I like randomly told them one day, you know what, I'm just gonna go do this startup thing. And for 2 to 3 years, we just couldn't get things to work. From 2016 to 2019, we tried 7 different things. They all failed. Our backs were against the wall. And I would wonder every day, like, am I like wasting my life away? And it was a really, really difficult period in time. But I think somehow, some way, we decided to just focus on one problem and go really deep on it because this was our last shot. And if this doesn't work, well, I guess we're going to go back and look for jobs. So that ended up being like the starting point for Fireflies. Then we launched, then COVID happens. And all of a sudden, there's this explosion of demand for meeting software. And we were one of the first meeting assistants at the time. And all of a sudden, we had to handle more volume than we could. Right? The product was literally duct taped together. Again, it's easy for me now, 5-6 years later, to come back and say, everything was easy. We were doing sharding. We knew exactly how to scale our infrastructure. But the reality was we had this monolith code base. We were building on Meteor.js, which is not a good tech stack. It's great if you're trying to build like a hobby website. So all of these sort of things, we made every possible mistake you can because we didn't have corporate experience. We didn't know what it's like to go build high scale software for millions of users or customers. We didn't have enterprise experience. These were just 2 college kids. My co-founder didn't even have like a work experience. He came straight out of college. And then I had 1 year of work experience. So building B2B software with little to no actual B2B experience, that was probably what was the hardest part.
Man, that's not a very typical story. But few follow-up questions here. You said for the first 2 to 3 years, you guys were struggling, right, to get that real product. But you also said that you guys decided if you could make like $10,000 a month, right, to survive, that would be okay. How did you manage for those 2 to 3 years? Were you making $10,000 a month, or did you just survive on savings?
So I was fortunate to have my savings for my 1 year at Microsoft. I moved back in with my parents for about 2 of those years. And so I could save on rent.
Yep.
And then I moved to San Francisco and I took a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 people. And then I converted the living room into a bedroom. And it was, I didn't even have to do that, but it was just the fact of going through and like waking up every day. And it was like a reminder. And since then I said, I'd never want to have roommates again. I'm good friends with the people that I roomed with, and they were also from Penn. But it was just such a humbling experience those couple of years. And I think if you are Indian and you grow up in an Asian community, and when people come to your parents' house and the first thing they ask is like, so what is your son doing? And like, they can't say he's unemployed or he's an entrepreneur. It's like this middle ground where it's very, very confusing. So before they're like, yeah, my son went to an Ivy League. He's working at Microsoft. He's a product manager there. Now they're like, what do we tell people what you do? He's like, he's working on his startup thing. So today it's cool. Like you have a badge that you are an entrepreneur and people are more accepting of it. But I think growing up in our culture, it was more about going the tried and tested path. So I think I broke so many rules along the way and I didn't know what I was doing. And today it's easy for me to sit down and say everything worked out perfectly because I had this master vision, but that's not the truth. And I think 95% of entrepreneurs, startup founders, like should be honest about that.
That is wonderful. I'm a father of a 3-year-old, so I totally understand, right? Living in the Indian community and where I live in Sunnyvale, I specifically chose that community because there are 80% other Indian families. So can you tell us a little bit more about what's the mindset of parents when you grow up in Indian community? How many hours do you study? Is it like back in India? Because when we grew up there, we're like, study for like 10 hours a day, right? And then you go into engineering college and it just keeps goes on and on. How's it in the Bay Area? Because a lot of schools here, for example, some of the private schools that are now, I look for my son, they have a different curriculum. They're like, okay, you finish your homework in school at 2:30, then you don't have your books at home. So what's the mentality of an Indian parents here in the Bay Area? Or is there a pressure to do really, really well in tech?
Oh man, you're taking me back. Quite honestly, I worked harder in high school than I did in college. And I went to a good college, but the environment I was in high school, it was very intense Asian, South Asian competition. You're fighting to be valedictorian. You're taking dozens of AP courses. So I had the conventional, stereotypical upbringing. So yeah, had to be quite studious just because I think what happens is Indian parents, especially when they moved here in the 2000s, they freeze that like mindset of what it was like for them. And when I go back to India and I see my cousins and stuff, they're way more chill, way more progressive, way more liberal, way more like easygoing. Their families are like a lot more easygoing versus I know my friends and myself where the parents come in the 90s or early 2000s and then they freeze that like mindset. So they were very intense. It's also this immigrant mindset where we came here, we're like investing all of this time and resources into you, so you have to work really hard. So that was definitely there for me. I was definitely working double, triple what I would have expected. And then, yeah, you're competing with other Indian, Asian kids in school who are really, really smart. One of my friends was saying, you look at the US Math Olympiad team, you realize that most of them are all Asian, and then they're competing with China. And, the one time we went. So that is really much the case with like my upbringing was a lot of classes, a lot of schooling, got to get the best grades, a bunch of extracurricular activities. So I honestly feel like a lot of my childhood was spent doing those things. One is I felt like, yes, I wasted time on things I didn't care about. Like I don't care about playing the piano, but I learned it for 6 years. I was a competitive swimmer for multiple years. I played tennis like varsity through school. So I couldn't pick up things that I was really passionate about, but I had to do things because it looked good on your resume. That was like the biggest thing. And when I got into the workforce, that was the same thing for me. It's like, am I doing this because I enjoy it or like is because it looks good for other people? That was like the biggest dichotomy for me. But it did show me like that hard work is really important. You can't just get by on being smart because when you're young, all these like relatives tell you, oh, your son is so smart, this and that. And then you realize like, why am I getting beaten by people that I thought I was smarter than? It's because they're working harder. So at the end of the day, you did learn a lot of like important skills around hard work. So that was my formative years.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Third follow-up question. So you mentioned that COVID literally changed the game for you. I've heard this so many times here in the Bay Area that you need to ride the wave, right? So does it really, really matter? The timing really matter for whatever startup that you're choosing? Or when somebody plan to start a company, do they need to look at this aspect that, okay, is it the right time to do this startup or is it the right wave that I'll be riding?
We didn't start at the right time. We started too early. And back then, the technology was a big question mark. Like transcription wasn't that good back then. So a lot of what we did was we were being too early to market. But in hindsight, I'm glad we were early rather than late. Because when you're late, you're competing with all of these other fast followers. Whereas when you're early, you can define your own market and your category. So initially, there was that technology wave that became incredibly possible. Then there was COVID, which was the market wave that became an accelerant. And then finally, there was the LLM wave, which made everything we were doing around language, voice, much more possible. So
Yep.
what we pitched in our seed round and Series A, we said, sometime in the next 5 years we'll solve this, but for now this is pretty good. That accelerated by 5 years, and the product became better than our wildest imagination. So I guess there's a thing saying if you keep at it long enough, something will come your way. And yes, we got lucky with that timing. It wasn't planned. But who knows? Maybe if we started 5 years later, it would have been easier to build a company, easier to build a product, would have been a lot less expensive, but there would have been more competition. So
Absolutely.
it's a trade-off.
Awesome. So Krish, what was some of the hardest days when you started? And I would say like from 2016-17 until 2021, like when you actually had your golden era of COVID, between those time, what were some of the hardest days? Do you remember any of those things where you like, okay, this is the time for me to give up or to go back to my job?
The biggest realization for me, and I think most people, is when you realize no one really cares about you, that's when life starts. The reason I say that is your pedigree, your degree, your achievements, none of that matters because that person is not buying from you because you were a valedictorian or because you went to MIT or you went to Stanford or that you're a really smart genius that won Math Olympiad. They're buying from you because that product solves a problem for them. So all the rules are thrown out the window.
Okay.
And the sooner you realize that no one really cares unless what are you doing for them? That was the biggest lesson I learned between those couple years. And no one is magically going to come and get you customers. Some investor or some angel is not going to save you. Like it's on you. Like you might be able to get some intros, but it's completely on you to make things work. So that high agency is what I learned during those formative years. That's the battle scars. There's always going to be issues, but like, are you going to play the victim or are you going to take responsibility and solve those things? So even though we failed every time, we failed differently each time and we learned every time we failed. So those are definitely like battle scars, but it's some of those little things that you will always remember where someone is like very interested and then they want to use your product, but then they say, hey, actually, I don't want to pay for it. You will remember those things forever. Or when someone says, hey, I really believe in what you're doing, I'm going to write you an angel check. And then they say, sorry, I spoke with my partner and it's a little too early for me.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm someone where I remember every single one of those. And once we made it, when a lot of these people came back and said, hey, we missed out on funding you, we'd love to chat, I'll still remember that. So I'm a little bit more, I take it personally, but those were really important motivational factors for me.
When somebody didn't give you like the angel funding or the seed round or pass on you the idea, if they come back to you now, do you entertain them?
I don't think we need them at this point, so which is unfortunate. Like we don't need funding, but there's also been many amazing people that took a bet on us, right? So I'm grateful for the people that took a bet on us. And I remember the people that like when they didn't take that bet on us, but then they go and fund something else. I also like to say that the startup graveyard is full of companies that were once the next big thing. So we don't want to get too arrogant or like feeling that like we've made it. So we always have this like underdog mentality even today. So it's really, really important to have that mindset. And we've seen dozens of direct competitors from 2018 till 2025 that were competing with us that went away. Right. There are many companies that are like were once Silicon Valley darlings that were billion-dollar businesses that went away. In fact, I was listening to a podcast recently where one of the people that was early at Facebook and early at Google said they moved into the offices of these once big industry giants from the 80s and 90s. So the world is never always yours. So we're always very cognizant of that and being very proactive. But we're fortunate enough to be in a place where we don't need to go out and seek funding. And sometimes people say like if you did raise funding every 2 months, like some of these other companies, you'd be in the news more and you get more marketing. Wouldn't it be nice to go raise a big round and then you could be in all of these top 50 startup lists? And ultimately, that was not something me and my co-founder found interesting. What we cared more about was winning customers and making customers happy. So we were under the radar for a very long time, and most people were like surprised to like realize the billion-dollar valuation and all of that stuff that came this year was completely shocking for them because we would never appear in those like Twitterverse, VCverse. We just did our thing.
So you raised last time back in 2021 and then you raised like I think total 19 millions, and after that you never raised any funding. And when I compare it with your competitors like Zoom Otter, they have been raising a lot of money in the last few years. So what was the mindset? Because when your competitors raise a lot of money, they can poach your employees, they can run a lot of ads on social media, and that definitely translate into revenue, into real customers. So what was your mindset to not raise after 2021?
Fundraising was very interesting. When you need money, no one gives you money. And when you don't need money, everyone wants to give you money. That's the funny thing. When we did our seed round, well, even before the seed round, we had a lot of amazing angel investors that came in. The CEO of Segment, the chief product officer at Slack,
I saw that,
the CMO at Salesforce. So we had a lot of these people where I wasn't even asking them for money. I was like asking them for advice, and then they gave funding and they wrote small checks. That was really important. And then we did our seed round. We said, okay, this 4.5 million, we're not going to raise money again, and we don't want to raise money. What ended up happening was around the Series A time, COVID has happened. We're just growing like a hockey stick. We even got some acquisition offers. And one of our investors said, hey, do you want to use this momentum to sell or to raise? And I was thinking, do we really need this money? But then we also didn't know what was going to happen in COVID. And if it could have been a boom, it could have been a bust. We don't know, right? So we raised that Series A very judiciously as let's raise this because we don't know what's going to happen down the road. And we just figured out product market fit. We're starting to scale. When we raised that Series A, we said we will make sure we never need to depend on outside capital again. And we were able to build the business and in 2023 become profitable in the AI space and then scale, which is an oxymoron because there is not many profitable AI startups while still growing well over triple digits over the last couple of years. So we were able to do all of that stuff and still win market share and do all the things that we needed to do. So I think it's not an either or. We've definitely started ramping up our go-to-market, our sales, our marketing this year. But I think throughout that whole thing, one of the core factors was because we were product led, customers are doing the marketing for us. We didn't have to spend $1 on marketing. Until this year, we
What
did
is
not
your
spend,
CAC?
I don't even know like the exact CAC because we don't pay for marketing. It's all on the freemium and the users because every time you use a product, you're bringing in new users for us. So in fact, like the ROI is positive even for free users.
Nice.
So so we didn't have to think about CAC LTV in the sense of paid marketing at the time till this year. So it was very much organic word of mouth, like how Dropbox and Calendly and some of these other companies like scaled up. So that's how we grew for the longest time. But yeah, that was one of the main reasons was we didn't have to like spend insane amounts on acquisition costs. And the second thing is we got to incredible economies of scale. We manage our own data centers and we've scaled. Like if we were using a large cloud provider, we'd probably be paying 5x the cost. I'm sure our competitors pay 5x the cost to run their infrastructure versus what we do. So we like verticalize and optimize our entire supply chain and stack so that we can compete.
Awesome, man. So you have over 500,000 organizations using your product, right?
Now it's over 700,000 organizations where people, but this is both free and paid users, and then several million users across those organizations.
I mean, that's a big number. So can you tell us a little bit about what was your customer acquisition journey? How did you acquire very initial set of customers? And then how did you grow to 500,000 plus customers? I mean, did you talk to each and every customer and like sell them? So how does that work for a B2B market?
Our support team is about 10 people and our CSM team is like 5 people. And
how do you divide these customers
we
between
automate, like we build agents internally that help us with a lot of automation. So that's been helpful. We've actually like the early days, the first 500 users at Fireflies, both paid and free, I spoke to every single one of them. I scheduled demos with every single one of them, educated them about the product. And then it's those 500 that start bringing it to more meetings. And then that ends up getting you more, like you just need to like brick by brick, literally like that was what we did. Like you build momentum brick by brick. So every user we brought in more users and that built up the viral loop. You just need that core cohort of power users. And the first 500 for us, then we started seeing the organic where we started seeing users that we never even talked to, like not from our network, completely random strangers coming and using the product, which was like really, really helpful. But today we have automated 80% of our customer support. And I was actually just playing tennis with a founder who had told me that they had like an issue and then they had like a response and a resolution within 5 minutes. And they're like, there's no way a human could have answered it that fast. And I'm like, yeah, it's most likely like AI helped it, but you don't even know that the AI helped to answer it. So That was a really interesting experience. So we build a lot of AI workflows and automations internally to solve that.
Apart from COVID, was there any other breakthrough moment when you thought that, okay, now this product is absolutely going to be successful?
I believe it was when we got our first customer that signed up through the website without even talking to us and paid for it and then sent us a note saying this product is like game changing. That was like our biggest aha moment where, wow, someone we didn't sell to, convince, or do anything. They went and used it and then they're like, I'm your biggest champion. And I'm like telling everyone about how much I like it. That's product market fit, in my opinion. That gave us a lot of confidence in like what we were able to do.
Did you face those early rejections, like when you reached out to an investor and they said, okay, this product is not going to work out? And how did you handle those situations?
Well, I think investors have the right to say no, and that's totally fine because they see hundreds of companies. And usually they're going to judge you in the early days based on how good the founder is. Because there's many companies that raise money for one type of product and then they completely pivot and do something else. We pivoted like 7 times in the early days, but we didn't raise institutional funding at the time. So for me, it was more about, hey, we have traction, we have a product. You've seen us over the last 1 year. We have the pedigree, and we're executing. So when you're saying no, it's less about your trust in the company, and you just don't trust me as a founder. So that was where I take it personally, the rejection in the early days. Where are you not willing to bet on me and all of the traction proof you have? You're like willing to bet on someone that doesn't even have a slide deck because they were an ex Google PM that knows your husband's, like
Does that work?
I think Silicon Valley definitely, it's a lot more of a meritocracy than let's say you're in Wall Street. But at the end of the day, who you know plays such a big role. And if you are someone that didn't, I would say like because we went to well-known schools, we at least got a foot in the door because other people that went to MIT and Penn were already in the tech circles. But beyond that, it opened that door for you. But beyond that, there isn't no other door, right? Versus if you went to a unknown entity university back then. This is why YC is so helpful for many people because it gives them that badge saying, hey, you might not have gone to a top school or you might not have worked at a top company, but if you are working hard and you have traction, you can do a lot of great things by come to YC and we'll give you that stamp of approval. And that works really well. And you see amazing companies come out of YC.
I might be wrong, but I've seen that YC considers a lot of founders who have recently dropped out of MIT or Stanford and they are just 19 or 20 years old.
I would assume so. We applied twice to YC and we got to the final round. Back then, I heard also it was a lot more rigorous in 2016, 2015, 2017 time. Whereas now I think the cohorts are bigger. It's a little bit easier to get in.
There are 4 cohorts.
Oh, wow. There was only one back then.
Yeah, and I think there were 2 back in 2020 and 21. Now there are 4 cohorts every year.
Wow. Yeah, it was definitely very competitive. I know my co-founder's brother, they went through Y Combinator. What I do feel though is when you are a known entity, it definitely helps. Even today, we see certain companies that are competing with us where we look at like everything we do and we compare objectively to everything they do. And we feel strongly that our product wins on every spec, every thing, but they have some very influential VC that is in the technoverse and has a big Twitter account who can prop them up, right? So like you can definitely get a lot more attention because of who is backing you and who's funding you. So I don't think we've ever aspired to be a Silicon Valley darling. We look at a lot of our customers, they're actually coming from outside of tech. And that's actually a good thing because when a recession happens and all of your customers are in tech and the bubble bursts, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. But that is also definitely 100% the case why people might be wondering today, why is it that I'm doing everything right and I have all of these things, but we don't get the recognition that someone that went to Stanford, that went through YC, that got like an A-list investor, that is raising lots of money. That's also another important thing. Like when you look at these Forbes lists and all this stuff, it's not about really your product traction or how good your product is or how much revenue you're making. It's purely like how much capital you're raising and who you're surrounded by. So 100%, like if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, focus on your customers where they're at. Don't focus on where all of this like your network and the Twitter VC world is at.
When I was researching about your company, I noticed that you have onboarded some of the toughest VCs like Khosla Ventures and Canon. So what was the story to get funding from these big VCs? How did you do that?
I just spoke to Vinod yesterday.
Really?
We catch up every couple months on how the company is doing. And I think he's definitely very interested in these AI agentic type companies, and he loves to be on the frontier of all of this stuff. One of the biggest helps that Khosla Ventures has been for us was because of their investment in OpenAI, being able to help us get connected to OpenAI and get early access back before GPT-3 was even launched.
Okay.
That helped us move the roadmap forward by at least 6 months, and that was really helpful. And I think one of the things that Khosla Ventures does really big is they're betting on these larger technological changes, bigger moonshots. Whereas, yes, revenue matters, scale matters, and all of that stuff matters. But you have to fundamentally like have something that is going to have a bigger impact technologically. And so I wanted those technology forward investors rather than just GTM forward investors who operate everything off of a spreadsheet. And it's like coin operated. And then they say like, oh yeah, if you spend X amount of money, your CAC will be this, and you'll do this. And we can then burn another 20 million on marketing and billboards on Times Square. And then you can do that. So this was very much about, are you building something amazing? Because innovation solves like 90% of your problems.
Yep.
And then getting customers and go to market a lot of times will solve itself if you're really doing something of value for customers. So that's how I've built the entire business. And they
Awesome.
align with that.
And what was the timeline to raise funds from, say, Khosla Ventures? From the day you reached out to them, you pitched, and then you finally got money in your bank. So how does raising Series A look like in Silicon Valley?
I think it's changed a lot more from when we raised. And back then, right before the COVID boom, fundraising was also pretty quick. I did the entire fundraise remotely over a video conferencing calls. We met the partnership. I met like several of the partners. There was due diligence. All of that happened over a span of, let's say, a couple weeks. And that was considered extremely fast back then, like from going there to term sheet to closing. And then you have due diligence and all of that stuff. But today I'm hearing like deals are being done over a weekend because there's so much demand. So I would not be the best person to share how fast these deals are happening. But there are companies that are raising at insane valuations without even a product, just because they were, ex OpenAI or ex Anthropic, and they have some idea and they have the right team. So
the definition of Series A has changed a lot. I mean, I recently met a founder of a company called Radical AI. They have raised $55 million in Series A round.
I think that was a Series B, Series C back in 2016.
Krish, it has become insanely competitive after the launch of large language models in ChatGPT that anyone can plug in a large language model and create a voice transcription company. So how do you plan to stand out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a new competitor popping up every day. So we're very cognizant of that. And you don't have to win every time, but when you lose, you should know why you've lost. And I know exactly why we lost a customer almost 99% of the time, because we reach out to customers, we look at what they say when they churn, and we learn from all of that, and we keep improving our product. So it's also about doing the little things right. So still making sure that the transcription is world class. There will be customers, that pay $10 that are going to be more demanding than the customers that pay $100,000 per year. So you have to be able to roll with the punches and be okay with all of that. There will be some customers where like, yeah, the transcript's great, but the comma was missing in this spot. So like, yeah, it can be sometimes as ridiculous as that, but you just have to learn and iterate and improve on that. So it's doing the little things right, making the transcription like world class, making the summaries really detailed, really crisp, really concise. Those are the little things that happen. And then making the user interface, we get a lot of feedback about, hey, you have so much functionality. There's these new tools out there that have less functionality, but their UI is simple. So how do you balance this insane amount of capabilities and functionality with like creating something beautiful and simple? So we take all of this feedback and we're constantly iterating. And when you're doing those little things right, like from the pricing to the landing pages to the design, when people come and objectively compare you versus another product, or when you have a sales team going up head to head, you want to win more often than lose. So that's how we think about the short-term battle. The long-term battle is we really do believe what we built as a platform is much bigger than an AI note taker. And we're going to be releasing a whole host of things that will go well beyond meetings and note taking in the very near future. But we want Fireflies, what you have as a note taker or a meeting assistant, to be one of dozens of other teammates that you can deploy, other agents you can deploy to do work across all of the most important places you work, whether that's email, whether that's Slack, whether that's in your CRM. So that's the future vision we're leaning towards, and that's something I think that will increase our total addressable market significantly.
So before we jump into more technical details, Krish, I would like to understand that if somebody has to start a voice transcription company today, what would they need to do? Or if you have to start it all over again today, what would be your approach? How would the technical architecture look like? Because from the outside, it looks that you can simply utilize APIs of large language models and you have a voice transcription app ready. Is it actually that easy? So can you tell me about what would be your approach today?
I'm going to be really candid with you. Today, it's a solved problem. You can look at what we're doing or a bunch of other companies are doing. You can take off-the-shelf stuff like off-the-shelf transcription, off-the-shelf LLMs. There's even off-the-shelf like products that can build bots for you. So all you're doing is like throwing a bunch of APIs together. You don't have to build anything from scratch, and you can get like a primitive version out in like a couple days. So I'm not going to say like there's a special mode to building software, because honestly, all software is going to be easy to build at some point in time. So what we really care about is making sure the workflows, the experience, and those sort of things are really good, getting the right type of attention from customers. Because if it was so easy to build, like I just said, but there should be a new company every other day that is like scaling up and competing. Like CRM is a solved problem, people would think, right? It's just spreadsheets and rows and columns. Why aren't there like 100 competitors to HubSpot and Salesforce that are competing with them for incredible market share? So there's one thing to build a product, and then there's another thing to build a company. And that was the hardest lesson I had to learn. But if I was starting out today, like I said, you could take almost everything off the shelf and build the product. Building the product is easy. Building the company is hard.
So you're saying that anyone can build a voice transcription app today. Is that correct?
Something on Lovable in like an hour. But if you want to build something a little bit more sophisticated, maybe it'll take a day. So building the product is not the hard part. And I say this with pure conviction that the rate at which companies are shipping has gone through the roof now with all of these like AI tools like Cursor and Devin and Lovable. I don't think Lovable is necessarily production grade, but if you're like a hobbyist, that's great. You want to build your like little fun website, but maybe that'll change and they'll be able to let you build full on end-to-end production ready stuff. But to be able to even just ship features today, the time to shipping features has gone down from weeks to hours. It's insanely quick. So you're going to have to compete with us as well as a dozen other upstarts that are competing with us, plus some of the larger incumbents to build a company. So what we will probably see is more of these like verticalized niche sort of products that come out and they'll address a niche and they'll build like small lifestyle businesses that make really good amount of money. I don't think you're going to need these sort of companies to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in capital. You might not need to raise any capital at all. Like you hear about a lot of these bootstrap companies. Today is probably the best time to build a bootstrap company because it's so easy to build and you can do it with 2 to 3 people. Whereas all the attention and the marketing is going to the company that raised 100 million or 500 million, or the OpenAI person that raised like $1 billion without a product. Like all of that is great for like that 1% of people. But like majority of people like me, if I was just like starting out, I would figure out how do I build this without raising any capital.
So that means with large language models coming into picture, people can build their own apps. And if you combine this with influencer thing, like if a founder is also an influencer on social media, he or she can also sell it. So you can create a product at almost zero expense, and then you can also promote it and sell it to the customers with almost zero marketing expense. I mean, that is amazing.
Well, if you can become your own distribution, that's fantastic. It's like you're seeing influencers now become these product creators, right? They're building their own energy drinks and sports bars and stuff like that. Whereas now, as a founder, I'm being told by my marketing team and like by advisors to like, you need to go and be an influencer on social media, and so that you can educate the market about AI and tools like that, and that will help create our own distribution channel. And I do believe to a large extent, like traditional PR is not the same anymore. Some would argue that traditional PR is dead because that TechCrunch article or whichever article you're getting, the shelf life of that before would have been like many days, maybe several weeks, to now it's like a couple hours and it gets buried in the noise. Whereas when people want to go out and announce big things, they're using their own social media handles like LinkedIn. Like the reach I get in LinkedIn is hundreds of thousands for something that's valuable, right? So it's really, really big. Or if you have your own YouTube channel like what you have, or you go on a podcast and then you have a long form conversation. In fact, I
That
feel
goes
like
a
this.
long way. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this recent presidential election was determined based on podcasts
Yes.
and social media. 100%. That
Uh,
plays a big role.
I don't exactly remember the stats, but I think Donald Trump did 20x more hours of podcast compared to his competitor. And every time I meet any of the founders who have even raised like 100 million plus, they all want to build their personal brand on social media because they know that it would open a lot more doors for them and it will win a lot of trust of their customers. So no, definitely
You have
that
some
plays.
folks like Nikhil in India who've done a fantastic job building
I
that, and he's
mean,
interviewing all these amazing people.
yeah.
But I think long form is something that's different because it's not like a 2 second, 10-second clip on a TV
Yep.
news channel. You actually have to have substance to talk for 2 hours or 1 hour straight, and you have to be very candid. You can't if you're artificial or if you're like trying to frame things to be politically correct, it'll come right through. So there is a level of more rawness, more honesty on this like new sort of content. In fact, you're seeing a lot of these influencers just take out their phone and like talk to the selfie like camera for like 5 minutes and talk about their day. And they're more famous than like the biggest Hollywood actors in the world.
Yep.
So the world is of, I'm so fascinated by this, just like you, about like what's happening in social and how people consume content. In fact, younger generations now are watching streamers that stream their life 24/7. They're like gamers and stuff like that. I have my younger brother who knows like a lot of these streamers where like people follow their life from what they eat, where they shop, to everything, to playing video games. So
that sounds crazy to me, but
like if you had someone following you around 24/7, filming you all the time, and everyone knows everything about you, but you get a lot of distribution, would you do it? And I think that would be really tough for me. Yeah.
Yeah, this social media thing is absolutely crazy. I mean, if a founder is also an influencer, people can make a lot of sales without spending anything. Let me tell you one social media strategy, a YouTube strategy that helped one of my friend gain 100,000 followers in just one day. So what he did that he created a new YouTube channel and utilizing a software called OBS, he recorded a video and played that video on a loop for 24 hours window. So he actually tricked the YouTube live feature where he seemed live for 24 hours and people continuously watched that video and he gained 100,000 subscribers. So that strategy works really, really well. And almost every news channel or people who do a lot of vlogging, they keep run it on their live, but they're not actually live. It's pre-recorded and it's on loop.
Yeah, live is a big. I think about because attention is the commodity, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the rare commodity today. So how do you get more attention than scrolling through 7-second reels or watching 1 hour content? You need someone like tuning into you. Maybe YouTube is becoming the new TV,
Yeah.
right? Where you
that
just
is.
like you have like these boomers that are just spending so much time on TV. Like right after work, they're just sitting for 4 or 5 hours a day watching TV. And that becomes the most valuable ad space in the world if you have someone's attention for 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the creators that I worked with who have say 500,000 or 1 million following, they've told me that the amount of money that they get for sponsoring a brand is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've heard like people in India, for example, influencers that like stream their cooking or their travel. And they've worked regular like wage jobs, have their life completely transformed where they can go buy BMWs and they can live like incredible lives. Like maybe they dropped out of 10th class, right? So it's so incredible how much social media has changed people's lives.
Let's jump into technical details of Fireflies. So when you started back in 2016 and 17, what was the technical architecture looked like? Which programming language did you use? How was the cloud infrastructure? Did you utilize any machine learning models or was it just rule based? So tell me about the entire technical architecture that you had back in 2016-17.
Wow, 2016, 2017, looking back, we've completely re-architected everything. But at the time, it was a monolith code base. We were using MongoDB. We were using Node at that time, Meteor for our front-end framework. So in fact, we were using Meteor for write both front and back end, which is so inefficient because that's the only thing we knew at the time. And like my co-founder also was just more proficient at JavaScript. So it was a fascinating time where we were literally duct taping the entire product together. It would be so slow to load. peak traffic, it would crash. And then we would have to stay up all night just whenever the servers would crash. AWS, we were not provisioning things correctly. In fact, we ran some instance running over a couple days and we got a $50,000 bill. And that was because someone on the team had forgot to disable the deployment after running some of the test environments. So that was really, really...
Did you actually have to pay that $50,000?
We were able to figure out and pay a smaller amount, but it was a shocking amount at the time. So, and we're like really good about looking at our costs, managing everything. But that was one of those things where I just couldn't sleep for 3 days knowing that like we wasted 50,000. You know what you could do with that money? Like where you could like deploy it. So there was definitely like that sort of thing. In fact, we made other mistakes too when it came to cost. Like I know other companies have made more egregious mistakes, but we've made several ourselves. One was using a headhunter to hire like a senior executive. Wasted $70,000 on that. Utter waste. Would never do it, would never recommend it, and would definitely tell people, especially when you're at seed or Series A, don't like go after someone that's like a VP at Amazon. That's not the right person for your company.
And why so?
Culturally, they're too chill. Like their life is comfortable. They're getting paid high 6 figures, maybe 7 figures to work not that hard. They have 50 people under them to do things for them, and they're not going to be as hungry.
Yep.
So when you're well established in that career in your 40s and 50s, and I don't want to generalize for everyone, but for a large part of them, like why should they go take this risk when they're having a comfy job and they've climbed the corporate ladder? So this is a sort of mindset stuff where we don't care about titles in our company, like just because someone's like a head of AI at like some big company. If you're a big company, yes, you need to chase the other person that was like a VP at Salesforce, and you need to bring them into service now, and you need to like do things. But for a startup, don't waste time and resources on that. Find people that are hungry, that want to learn, that have some level of experience and have done it, but have a high growth potential, because so much of a startup is rolling up your sleeves and like doing something and figuring it out and then making the mistake and then correcting it. That's the best way. So yeah, we wasted a lot of money doing things that were recommended by people who had no clue how to run a company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you actually spend $70,000?
That was we didn't hire anyone, but we wasted $70,000 on that firm, which was really bad. And then recently there was, especially with these like agencies and firms that are recommended by people, like one was like some marketing agency that was, you know, they hire writers for you, write like content and blogs and stuff like that. And we thought we had said, hey, we're not going to write any more blogs, but they still kept charging us for it for 3 months. And we come back and say, hey, what's this bill? Like, you know, this is not in good faith. You haven't done anything for us in 3 months. It's like, oh, but it's a retainer. So like you just have to like look through all of these sort of things. But yes, you're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way, and you have to like learn from them.
That's awesome. And did you use any AI models, or did you fine tune any ML models?
Early days, there was no LLMs, right? So it was
not LLM.
Yeah, it was our own classification models, our own NLP stuff. In fact, for the longest time, some of the NLP classifiers that I wrote were powering a lot of our tasks engine till 2022, 2023.
Okay.
And this is things I wrote back in 2016.
So when large language models were launched in 2023, did you actually overhaul your entire architecture that you built between 2016 and 2022 and replaced it with GPT?
We did do that progressively and then more aggressively, because you couldn't do it all at once, because it was very costly and very expensive. Some companies don't care about margin, so go ahead and do it, burn a lot of money. But we had to do it progressively.
Sorry, what was costly, the previous stack or the new one?
The new stack was insanely expensive.
Really?
Right, because you're making LLM calls for every little thing. It's really expensive. Obviously, prices have gone down in the last 1 year, 2 years, but early on, it was very cost prohibitive. That's why OpenAI and Anthropic have cut their costs, and they've come out with multiple models from GPT-4 to Mini to Nano. And then GPT-5, in fact, is more cost sensitive than some of the other models, right? So if you do run a business and then you just spam an LLM 24/7, yeah, good luck like looking at those bills. It's just going to be like our $50,000 bill.
So now you have large language models implemented and they run 24/7. So how do you manage bills now? You have large language models implemented, and I assume they run 24/7 because you have billions of voice notes to be converted. So how do you manage the bill? Because
ours are working 24/7. We figured out ways to scale those things where we're not burning a lot of cash.
Any advice there from the technical perspective, how someone can do? Because I think you're processing millions of billions
a transcript
of
is equivalent to, I looked at 500 emails.
Yeah.
Right? Like several documents. Like one meeting is worth like several documents. So we process things at a much higher scale
Yeah.
than like just doing like a paragraph of text, right? So a lot of the things that we do, we have smart provisioning, we have multiple models. We've gotten very creative in terms of how we handle those things without impacting quality. Like ultimately, like most things in life, it's a trade-off between quality, speed, and cost. And you're not going to get everything, but somehow we're figuring out how to balance and tiptoe those lines pretty well. But if cost was not an issue and you had infinite compute and you can run it all the time, I think just with the current technology, if it was cheaper, people can do some incredible things with it. And so we will get to a place where you can run 24/7 LLMs all the time on every single query. But if you're a small startup, I'm trying to give this advice for a small startup, that's not the right thing to do at the beginning, like especially if you are trying to make your margins work.
And have you implemented large language models in your private server? And does it cost cheaper?
Yeah, if you're using Llama or one of these like open source models,
now even ChatGPT has.
Yeah, you can scale that up. And ChatGPT, OpenAI is coming out with an open source model too. I've also seen a lot of promising things about like DeepSeek. We don't use DeepSeek internally because of some of the regulation stuff. But there will be cheaper, smarter models that are going to be able to run on device. I think Apple's also working on some of this stuff. Like they're a little late entrant to the AI space. But if you can have models that run on edge on your computer, on your device, yeah, then you would run an LLM 24/7 all the time.
Okay, let's talk about data security. So you work with thousands of organizations, millions of people utilize your platform every single day, and especially for meetings. And I'm sure there must be a lot of confidential information. So how do you ensure data security of all that data? And also, what is your advice for an early stage founder who's starting a company like this, how they can ensure data security? Are there any tools specifically that you'd like to recommend to people, or any specific best practices that they can implement to ensure data security?
So this is one of those things where if you know what you're doing, which we didn't at the time, you'd architect it right the first time. When we were going and getting SOC 2 compliance or HIPAA compliance, we had to go back and again re-architect everything to be compliant, because you need audit logs, you need to have a lot of these other systems in place. Governance, one of the things we do, and we're probably the only meeting assistant in the space that offers this, is having the ability to have private storage. So you can have those meetings and conversations stored on your own server and in a separate instance versus the general cloud. That is something CIOs love, and I think a lot of these other companies don't. Another big thing is we don't train on customer data. That's a policy we've set up from the get-go. And there are companies today that are getting in a lot of trouble for training on customer data. So Otter is one of them, and we're getting a lot of customers over from Otter who are like, yeah, we had no idea that Otter's training their models and things on that. And there's an ongoing lawsuit related to that. I don't know, again, the full details of what that lawsuit is and where it entails. Things around compliance and notification. Like ultimately, it is a user's responsibility when they're using the product to notify people that they're using a call, meeting, recording, note-taking software. We give them ways for them to make it easier. Like you can turn something on that'll send a notification before via email. There's an in-chat notification we give. There are tools out there, not saying Fireflies, but where you don't even know it's being captured. And so it's like if you were to go to dinner and you have some pocket recorder device, like, do you blame the company that built the device, or do you blame the person for silently recording something illegally without notifying them, right? So there's always this gray area around this stuff. But yeah, definitely following compliance, having data security, admin controls and access controls has been huge for us in winning lots of deals. So there are companies where administrators need to restrict certain types of access to certain type of content, certain type of meetings. They need to have like data retention policies so they can delete the data. So all of those sort of things. It's easy to build a product, but this sort of stuff takes time. So this is the things that like take time, like where in order to build a company that can sell into 500,000 different organizations and have serious buyers like buy into it. Good luck like dealing with those like 200, 300 questionnaires. So we've had to gone through all of that. We had to go through every single one of those experiences to make the product as robust as it is today.
So you mentioned that a few companies utilize this meeting data to train their model. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? I'm trying to understand that how a meeting data would make product do better transcriptions in the future?
Well, the more data you have, the more examples you have, the more you can label that data, and then you can like go train it, right? It's similar to how you train an LLM or a classifier. So I would assume they're doing something like that. They might be doing something on voice detection as well. We don't touch any of that sort of stuff by default, and we would not do that for customers because we don't want to use your data to like go train a general purpose model. Like there could be customers that come to us and say, no, I want you to train on just my data for just me and deploy something custom. That's different versus if you are able to train on people's data and do that stuff, that's not. I think that's where you get into some trouble.
Okay, so can you give me an example? If a customer says that you can utilize my data to train your model, how would the app, a voice transcription app, perform better before and after using the training data?
Well, you can get them better transcription, better terminology based on their domain, their industry. You can have more customization that can happen. But the thing is, even without training on data, today we can give that customer a more customized summary, better outputs. So the data training itself is not necessarily needed, or the fine tuning is not necessarily needed on their specific. So we have many ways without doing any training data, just based on changing some of the weights and some of the personalization capabilities, we can deliver a really great experience to you. I think some of these companies that are building their own in-house models need training data. We're not building our own in-house models. We're very happy to partner with OpenAI and Anthropic and several of the other companies. So the place where you're going to get in trouble is if you're like building your own in-house LLMs and classification models and speech models. That's when you are going to need to train general purpose things, which I don't want to come and make the claim that allegedly that so-and-so competitors are doing that, but that is one of the reasons why they need to do it and we don't.
Okay, all right. By the way, congratulations on your partnership with Perplexity. I think that is going to be a huge add-on in the app.
We are working, we're both integrating with Perplexity and also have a partnership with them. So excited to see how that pans out. I'm just very like bullish on many of these companies, both Anthropic, OpenAI, Perplexity, several of these companies. I've invested in all of those companies because I do believe in the future, like what will happen with them. And we're also partnering and using their technology. So at some point in time, like it's going to be a very competitive space. But right now, they're definitely leading the front, and then they're helping so many other businesses innovate as well.
Also, how does retrieval and the vector search work in the voice transcription app?
It's very hard. I'll just say that. And we haven't figured it out perfectly.
You have this feature called Ask Fred. So when someone asks anything from Fireflies, do you actually go to the vector database and retrieve information?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
And it's a hard problem. And especially when you're doing hundreds and hundreds of transcripts, it's a really hard problem where you have to deal with cost. Like I can give you a great answer, but it's gonna, like, if it costs you $50 to get that answer, I don't know if you'd want it, right? So how do you do it where it's like dirt cheap, where it's a couple cents and it's fast and it's comprehensive? Vector search is one of those harder things we have to do. In fact, we took that same technology and built it into we built our own internal customer support agent that is now handling 80% of the support tickets, where it's taking in all of our different support guides and videos and other content and being able to answer those questions.
So I have built RAG agents for my customers where we built a chatbot for them, and I actually teach them that how you can build your own chatbot, train it with your own data, and it will be dirt cheap compared to any other third-party chatbot service if you hire. So I'm trying to think it for Fireflies, a big voice transcription app where you have data in millions, right? And when someone asks Fireflies about a particular information, does it actually go to the vector database and retrieve information from that million data points?
It's easier on paper, much harder in production. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm asking you this question because this podcast will also go in front of a lot of experienced technical folks, right? And they would always love to hear, okay, what is the answer of that?
I'm not sure if my CTO would be happy me sharing all of it.
No worries.
But no, it is definitely, I think that's the key to
but
what
the baseline structure remains same.
Of course. And that is something that's going to be really important for the future of Fireflies as we expand beyond meetings. So.
Got it. Okay. This one is a very important question, which I always wanted to understand. What are the current limitations of a large language model? Can they transcribe any voice into text, or do they have any limitations that we are not aware of?
We've seen so much improvement in recent times with it being able to work on accents Fireflies works in 100 different languages. It can be in noisy environments. Like we have a mobile app for in-person meeting notes. So you can pull it out in a crowded restaurant and you're having a meeting. It'll capture that with really high accuracy. So the actual transcription for English in a normal environment like this, you're going to get like 98%.
Okay.
It's perfect. Like you hire someone overseas to transcribe it, they're going to probably make more mistakes than our model. Right? So that is something that I've definitely learned is the core use case we've solved in many places. Now it's a lot about the edge cases, like if you have multiple speakers talking over each other, speaker diarization in certain types of contexts, like where there's multiple people in a conference room. If you have people with a thick accent that are speaking in another language. One of the things that we're working on now that I'm really excited about is, let's say we start speaking in English and then we switch to Hindi middle and then we switch back to English and then someone speaks Spanish, capturing all of that without having to change any of the settings. So that's something we're really excited about. We're doing auto language detection where your settings might be on a certain language, but then you come in and you're starting to speak French. How do you get the AI to know that? How do you get certain terminology picked up really well? And know, for example, you're talking about pharmaceutical stuff. All those names are really long and funky. How do you get that? So there's so much work that's being done. That's what I'm saying. You can build this app in a couple hours, but you can build a product in a couple hours, but to build a company, it's a lot harder. Because those are the things customers are going to come and ask you about.
Can you give me a 30 seconds to 1 minute tutorial on how can I make a GPT-5 model better for voice transcription? So suppose if I have access to GPT-5 API and I'm creating a voice transcription app, now I have to take care of some of the edge cases like noise or 5 people talking at the same time, right? Or different kind of voices coming together, right? How do you improve any large language model, be it GPT-5 or anything else, so that it can handle these edge cases? So do you perform any fine tuning or how does that process look like?
Oh, without saying too much, I think one of the things that we've seen is you can take really smart models and get really crappy outputs just based on how you're prompting and how much you're feeding in. Whereas if you're taking a model that is not as smart, but you're able to do chain of thought and sequence things, you're able to do really, really good things with that. This is, again, very different problem from solving for voice recognition or noisy environments. That I think is a completely different ball game. And that's something we ourselves don't even do because we work with several different vendors on that part. But I'm also really amazed at some of these, some of the tech that you can get where off the shelf you can get something that will clean up the audio and remove the noise,
can
remove
you give
the
some
pauses.
examples?
There's definitely some open source libraries that you can get where it'll just clean up. One of the things I love is Adobe Enhance we talked about. There's models like that are open source that work really well. In fact, I know someone that's working on a company that is in the contact center, call center space where it will in real time change someone's accent if they have a thick accent into an English American accent for the call center. So if you have a BPO in the Philippines or somewhere, it'll sound like Bob from Texas. So there's so much things you can do just around the transformation of the audio, which works really, really well. The other parts that I think that are really interesting is, do you spam a low-cost LLM multiple times to get a better output and ask it to think through? Or do you use a single shot with a best, a high-class, high-quality LLM? So these are the sort of things where sometimes we were shocked where running it over and over again with a lower quality LLM performed better outputs at a cheaper output than a high quality LLM. So these are all context-based, situational, scenario-based. But yeah, you can do some magical things. Yeah.
Okay, last few questions. At the beginning, you mentioned that you're not using AWS because eventually you get a very, very heavy bill. So what's your advice for an early stage founder to reduce cloud cost, and what could be an alternative of AWS?
Oh,
an app for a scalable.
For starters, you should definitely be using AWS or GCP. Don't take what I'm doing as as advice on day one. That's not the right thing to do.
But say later on when they scale.
Later on, it depends on the type of cost you have. We're also a big RPA company, so we do a lot of robotic process automation in the browser. So for that is really cost intensive. We need to spin up VMs. So as a result, it makes a lot more sense for us to manage our own infrastructure. And we still obviously rely on our partners at AWS and GCP, but for our bulk of our workloads, we do things on our own. and that helps us on cost. But you shouldn't be doing that sort of cost optimization early on. Even in the first couple of years of your journey, that's not the right thing to do. And it took us many years to do the full migration. So,
right. Well, thank you so much, Krish, for your time. I really, really appreciate it for sharing all of this amazing information. I personally have learned a lot about voice transcription apps, a lot about large language models, and thank you for sharing your journey. And congratulations on your success so far. And I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.